Hey, hey, hey. Happy Tuesday. Come on in. Pull up a chair. The Gaming Gang Dispatch is in the air. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. It is Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. This is live stream number 1145. Yikes. If you're not overly familiar with the show, let me point out, super casual, just hanging around talking about the latest in tabletop gaming news. And then I will normally pontificate about a topic related to our hobby, which tonight, it is our final January Cthulhuesday, where throughout the month, I've actually been taking a look at a Call of Cthulhu adventure on Tuesday nights. We take a little bit of a deep dive into it, discuss the adventure, how I would go about running it, how I have gone about running it. Tonight, a little bit different, since this will be our final Cthulhuesday. I am going to share some keeper tips for those of you out there running Call of Cthulhu. Doesn't matter if you're brand new to being a keeper or if you've been keeping, I guess it would be it, right? So keepers keep. So if you're running Call of Cthulhu, I guess you're keeping. Anyway, regardless, doesn't matter if you're new at it or if you've been doing it for decades, like this guy. You might find something of interest in the tips I'm about to share later on. Of course, that'll be after we tackle the tabletop gaming news. So I also want to point out, this is a live stream. Obviously enough, if you're watching live, you know that. But if you didn't know, there is also chat available. It's not on screen. It's one of the ways I keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. But if you are a subscriber to the channel and have been for at least 10 whole minutes, you can take part in chat. So if you got a question, comments, maybe you just want to say howdy. Howdy ho, Jeff. Yeah, it was a terrible Mr. Hanky. If you just want to partake in chat, you can do so, but you have to check those two boxes. Be a subscriber and have been for at least 10 whole minutes. Yes. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. Come on, you know the drill by now. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Speaking of chat, let's see. First out the gate tonight is our friend of the show, the Madman. Happens to be one of our chat moderators also. Kathy Evans is with us, as is Kevin King, Semper Buffo. Michael Berry is popping on in for the first time. Welcome aboard. Make yourself comfortable. Gleeman RX is also in the house, as is Sean O'Donnell. Very nice. Very nice. Welcome aboard, everybody. So tonight, as I mentioned, I will be tackling some keeper tips for Call of Cthulhu. I am also going to talk a little bit about what I'm thinking of doing as far as the future of the live stream, what I'm kind of kicking around. We'll talk about that. We'll discuss that after we jump on into the news of the day. Yes. Don't worry. I'm not going to disappear, at least not at this point in time. But I do want to, I'm transparent. Well, as far as the Gaming Gang goes, I mean, you can't see through me, but I am very transparent about what goes on with the outlet, with the website, with the channel, so forth. We'll talk, we'll discuss. I'll bounce some things around. But first, let's jump on into the tabletop gaming news. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, I should also mention, as I pause and take a sip, audio should sound a little bit different. To me, the audio was sounding a little flat. So I have done some tweaks. Hopefully there's a little more life, a little more, I say they like to refer to it as brightness to the audio. So, don't know. We'll find out. We shall see. We shall see. But anyway, so I wanted to point that out. If the audio sounds okay, by all means, let me know in chat. If you like the change, let me know. For most people, it's probably not even going to be really noticeable. But we'll find out. We'll see what happens. All right, let's jump on into the news. Because on its way into stores for Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound is Ruins of the Past. And I've got the latest from my friends over at Cubicle 7 Games. Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound, Ruins of the Past, features a host of adventurous detours and destinations. Perfect locales for parties seeking a one-shot divergence between adventures, or the crucial final stop of a grand campaign. A collection designed for true antiquarians of the mortal realms. These sites are home to malefic villains and exciting mysteries, arcane mechanisms, cracked storm vaults, and fiercely opposed active realm gates. Somebody busted out their thesaurus for this sell sheet information. Rules of the Past contains 9 unique adventure locations from across the mortal realms, each comprising a rich history, deadly hordes of enemies, lost wonders, and accursed secrets. Game Master advice on integrating each location into your campaign, how to weave players into it, and how to reward them. Exploration rules to lead parties on a dangerous trek across the mortal realms and for delving into these perilous locations. Stunning maps, detailed diagrams, and matching encounter tables brimming with strange sights and challenges to uncover. There's even a full bestiary, including all the new allies and enemies you'll need to create encounters. This 128-page hardcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $39.99. Of course, you get that free PDF if you order from Cubicle 7 Games or one of their brick and mortar, or I think they call it bits and mortar, partners. But of course, if you just want to grab the PDF alone, you can do so over at Drive-Thru RPG for $19.99. Very nice, very nice. Good to see more Cubicle 7 game stuff coming out. We are going to have an opportunity to take a look at this. So I already talked to my contact over at Cubicle 7 Games. She asked if I wanted to take a peek at this, as well as I think there's 3 other releases that are hitting stores. And I said, well, yeah, of course. Duh. So we will be seeing this. I want to say, I think the other items coming out, one is for, I think there's a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, fingers crossed. I know another Wrath and Glory release is coming out, and I think it's also the Imperium Maledictum starter set. So we should have some Cubicle 7 Games goodies to be taking a peek at pretty soon. Very nice. Sarah D is with us, the lovely and talented Miss Sarah D, who is lurking in the shadows, has chimed in to say hello to everybody. She's also one of our chat moderators, so behave. Otherwise, she will wield her glittery banhammer. Will Moore is also checking on in. Welcome aboard, Will. Let's move on to our next news piece, because Creative Crowbar and Exalted Funeral will be releasing the eagerly anticipated Monty Python's co-curricular medieval reenactment program in March. And here's their proclamation. Exalted Funeral and Crowbar Creative are chuffed to announce the release date for the new, much ballyhooed tabletop role-playing game, Monty Python's co-curricular medieval reenactment program, which, having raised $1.9 million on Kickstarter, is set for wide release on March 5th. The program lovingly rips off Monty Python's entire body of work and crams it into a rules-light, expectation-defying experience, and has proven to be 46.3% more serious and educational than all those silly play-acting games on the market. The creators hereby proclaim the game to be entirely uncontaminated by satire, farce, parody, surrealism, wordplay, fourth wall breaks, allusions to Proust, references to a certain potted meat, spam anyone, and any other elements that could be used to evoke mirth. Seems like no matter how grim and serious your medieval role-playing game is meant to be, somebody is going to propose the building of a Trojan rabbit, mention unladen swallows, or shrug off incoming damage as only a flesh wound. Says Brian Saliba, founder of Crowbar Creative. It's almost inevitable: death, taxes, and RPG Pythonification. So we concluded that by starting with the Monty Python role-playing game, we'd ensure a robust and serious gaming experience. But everyone knows the lines, if not the entire movie, by heart. So there's no use just replicating familiar scenes. Fortunately, our licensor agreed and opened up their entire catalog for us to plunder: television, films, books, albums, artwork, etc. Even though the game's de facto setting is England, circa 932 AD, you may well find yourself facing a Roman legion, an anatomically mutated cat, swashbuckling accountants, unexpected inquisitors, because obviously nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, or an enraged studio audience. It's all rather mad. Frankly, I can't believe they said yes. Are you still recording? Monty Python's co-curricular medieval reenactment program is unquestionably the world's greatest tabletop role-playing game that features the word spam on 1 out of every 7 pages. The 250-ish page hardcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $50. You can order it right now over on Exalted Funeral. Or if you want, you can grab the 61-piece deluxe set for an MSRP of $120, also by way of Exalted Funeral. And you can grab, I don't know if you're going to be able to get the deluxe set in stores. You should be able to get the hardcover in stores on March 5th. Very nice. Very nice. Interesting. This is something else we're going to get an opportunity to see, because the fine folks over at Exalted Funeral touched base with me. And we are also going to have to actually get an opportunity to take a peek at the Land of Eam role-playing game. You might recall I shared news of that Kickstarter, and I know the PDFs are out. And it's sort of a mashup, kind of looks like a mashup of the Muppets and Dungeons and Dragons. It looks pretty entertaining. So we are going to get an opportunity to take a peek at that. I don't know if we're going to get to see the deluxe set, if we'll just get to see the books. We'll find out. We'll find out. But according to Exalted Funeral, we will be checking that out. And I do believe the fine folks over at Crowbar Creative have also pointed out they want the gaming gang to review this Monty Python role-playing game. So it's like we've got some cool stuff on the horizon for us to dive on into. Maurice Derry is with us in chat. Welcome aboard. Kevin King says the Imperium Maledictum starter set is already out in PDF. Yeah, it has been in for a little bit. Said the print should be coming this quarter. Yeah, it should be early this quarter because, as I mentioned, my contact from Cubicle 7 Games did ask if I was interested in checking that out. And like I said, I'd say I'm 90% positive that it's the Imperium Maledictum starter set, which is one of those 4 items they're going to be sending my way. So we shall see. Very nice. Gluing RX's swashbuckling accountants. I'm glad to see they include that part from their Meaning of Life movie. Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah. Care for a wafer thin after dinner mint? On to the next news piece. The Kickstarter for Vigilante City 45E is just about to wrap up, and it is from Bloat Games. When I looked, it was just a few dollars away from its funding mark. At this point, I think it's probably already funded. So let's talk about it, because from the creators of Dark Places and Demigorgons and the original Survive This, Vigilante City, comes Vigilante City 45E, a gritty, street-level superhero game set in the near future. Vigilante City 45E is the tabletop role-playing game love letter to the 1990s superhero cartoons. Batman, the animated series, X-Men, Spider-Man, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If you want to play a supers role-playing game that's like watching an episode of your favorite superhero cartoons, then Vigilante City for 5e is the perfect game to have that type of experience. Vigilante City for 5e is based on the mechanics of, well, you guessed it, the world's most popular fantasy role-playing game, and adapted for a modern super setting by Vigilante City creators Josh Palmer and Eric Bloat. The Kickstarter is for 2 game books, the core rules as well as the Game Master's Guide. Vigilante City 45E contains rules for humans, mutant humans, Borg conversion and power armor, magic, mutant abilities, psionics, speedsters, and super soldier drugs, background/origins, weapons, equipment, gadgets, vehicle upgrades, vehicle combat, and so much more. It is 100% compatible with the original 5e and integrated with the new 5e updates. Play your game your way. Vigilante City features both human without powers and mega human with powers classes. The human, you've got archer, athlete, crime fighter, dark avenger, gadgeteer, martial artist, mercenary, protege, and true vigilante. And the mega human is the anthropomorph, the Borg, mutant, mystic, powered armor, scion, speedster, as well as the super soldier. It's important to note that Vigilante City for 5e is designed for street-level vigilantes, not paragons or cosmic-level super beings. Think Batman, not Superman. Iron Man, not Thor. Deadpool, not Green Lantern. Vigilante City for 5e is designed with Game Masters in mind, too. Game Master's Guide contains a detailed city generator to allow the GM to build the exact city they want to base their game in. There's also GM advice for running the game, a huge selection of villain-based adventure seeds, quick NPC and villain generation tables, a D100 basic adventure hooks table, Mutant Island as far as an optional setting and adventure, and so much more. Now, there is a short Kickstarter video. It's a little more than a minute, so let's give it a peek. The Kickstarter project for Vigilante City, as I mentioned, it should be fully funded. It was a handful of dollars shy when I put this news piece together. If not, then it's very possible that your pledge could push them over the funding mark. I don't know. But regardless, you can reserve copies of the 2 hardcovers, the core rules and that GM's guide, with PDFs for a $59 pledge. If you want to just score the PDFs, that's fine too. You can do that with a $29 pledge through January 31st. As I mentioned, very few hours left for you to jump on board this. Expected delivery is October. Very nice. So, Gleam1RX asks if this is related to the Vigilante City in the index card role-playing games core rulebook. It is. Yes. In fact, I think there's also an additional supplement for the index card role-playing game that is Vigilante City that kind of expands on it. That is exactly what this is. In fact, that's why it sort of looks a bit like the same art style as we've seen in index card role-playing game. Aha. So there is that. There is that. Tessie Trekkie points out they had a brief work trip to the U.S. They were in Pittsburgh, said cold, nights long, food's good, portions are large. Well, yeah, that's an American thing. People mostly friendly, yes. Funny enough, I spent, not tons of time in New York, but I was in New York a good amount of time dropping vehicles off and stuff. I never encountered anybody who was rude. Everybody was always friendly. In fact, that's one of the things that strikes people about Chicago, in the Chicago area, is how friendly we are. Because they expect us, Chicago, huge city, people are going to be, no, we're pretty friendly folks. Yes, we are. Tipping strangers and the toilet stall gaps were creepy. Yeah, tipping is a little different because it's not something that's done in many other parts of the world. A lot of times that's just added into the price of your meal anyway, meal or drink or whatever you have. And yes, the toilet stall gaps being creepy is for everyone. Even Americans don't necessarily like those toilet stall gaps. I understand that Asians, when they come and visit the United States, those gaps in the toilet stalls really do freak them out. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. So on occasion, every once in a while, you will go someplace and they actually have like floor to like eye level, just completely covered, no gaps, no nothing. And it's sort of like, wow, really? That's pretty cool. Melwinius from York is joining us once again. Welcome aboard. Good to see you. On to our next news piece, because arriving in stores next week from Paizo Inc. is the remaster for Pathfinder Guns and Gears. And I've got the deets. Gear up and throw down. When Sword and Spell just won't be enough to win the day, it's time to power up your game with clockwork gears, lightning coils, and black powder. Guns and Gears Remastered, the latest hardcover rulebook for the Pathfinder role-playing game, brings the excitement of firearms and fantasy technology to your tabletop, updated to work perfectly with the remastered Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules. Unravel the secrets of clockworks with the new Inventor class, or blow away your opposition as a firearm-wielding gunslinger. In addition to new classes, a plethora of archetypes, backgrounds, vehicles, siege engines, gadgets, and the remastered automaton ancestry are all ready to expand your game with options for battlefields large and small. Pathfinder Guns and Gears Remastered features 2 new classes, the Clever Inventor and the Sharpshooting Gunslinger, updated to work perfectly with the remastered Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules. The remastered automaton ancestry for players who want to play a customizable construct. Firearms of all stripes, from the simple and effective flintlock pistol to versatile gun blades. Dozens of new archetypes, scores of new gadgets and vehicles, siege engines and accompanying rules, a gazetteer of Galarian revealing how firearms and technology fit into the Age of Lost Omens, including a look at the technology of the continents of Arcadia and Xianxia, and never before revealed secrets of the rough and tumble, gritty city of Alkenstar. Yes, there was the adventure path that was focused on Alkenstar when this book originally came out for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This 230 plus page hardcover is going to carry an MSRP of $69.99. You can grab just the PDF for $19.99 when they become available February 5th. We do have a review of Guns and Gears for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Don't have the remaster. I don't think I'll see the remaster because the way my review copies work with Pathfinder and Starfinder is if it's something new, they send it. If it's something that's, say, like this remaster book isn't considered new, or if they do something where it's like a pocket edition of the book, or if they collect if they take the like trio of chapters of an adventure path and put it together in a hardcover book, I don't get those. They don't send those. It's kind of strange because they've got it sort of set up like a subscription. And then not too long ago, I received an email saying, hey, we're doing away with that kind of subscription model. We're going to, send stuff as reviewers, and then they haven't done that. So it's weird. But what I'm trying to say is if you're curious about this book, granted, yes, it'll be the remaster version of this, but really not a whole lot of changes. If you're curious about this book, check out our review. On to our final news piece. Now available in print from Pickpocket Press is Tales from Argosa. Here's the lowdown. Tales of Argosa, a.k.a. Low Fantasy Gaming 2nd Edition, is a sword and sorcery-inspired emergent play adventure game for groups or solo. Adventures are short, sharp, and focused on dangerous wilds, treacherous cities, fierce battles, daring exploits, perilous magic, fabulous treasures, and cosmic weird. It features a familiar D20-based system, 9 classes, with the Artificer or Alchemist variant, Barbarian, Bard, Cultist, Fighter, Monk, Ranger, Rogue, and Magic User, only 2 of which involve magic. 9th level max caps power levels for PC power levels. Why would it cap power levels? Dope. So you only have 9 levels. You've got a flatter hit point curve because most player characters will have approximately 10 to 40 hit points over their 9 levels. Every 3rd level design your own PC ability in conjunction with your game master, or you can choose from over 40 examples. You roll under for attribute checks. Hey, I know somebody who's putting together a role-playing game that's like that. Making every stat point matter. Degrees of success via great successes and terrible failures. Roll high for attack and damage rolls. Wisdom is actually split into perception and willpower. The perception modifier applies to ranged attacks instead of dexterity. Simple skills grant a +1 bonus on relevant attribute checks, but more importantly, allow a player character to access their limited reroll pool if they fail. The variant rules chapter includes a further simplified class, race, and background combo to replace the skill list if you desire, and much, much more. The 264-page hardcover with PDF is available now over at Drive-Thru RPG for $44.99. Or if you want to just snag the PDF, you can do so for $24.99. Kind of cool that this is the second edition of Low Fantasy Gaming, which is actually a pretty decent sword and sorcery role-playing game. It's not super crunchy. Kind of interesting that the powers that be decided they were going to retitle it Tales of Argosa. And I suppose in some ways that kind of probably frees them up a little bit, because then if they want to kind of have a little more fantasy in the mix, doesn't have to be low. Artwork looks solid. It's pretty cool. Looks pretty cool. You might want to take a peek. All right, that is it for the news tonight. Of course, I was just talking about Drive-Thru RPG. Don't forget, the Gaming Gang, thus the Dispatch, is affiliated with the One Bookshelf sites. So if you are going to go visit Drive-Thru RPG, Storyteller's Vault, Dungeon Masters Guild, Wargame Vault even, please stop by thegaminggang.com first. Click on one of our banners. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I'll get 5% of that sale. It doesn't change the cost of your purchase. I just happen to get 5% of it. And all those nickels, dimes, and quarters really do go a long way to keeping thegaminggang.com around. If you like this video, if you like the video, if you dig the channel, if you find thegaminggang.com to be a valuable resource, hell, if you just like what we do, please stop by paypal.me/thegaminggang to make a small donation. Hell, you can buy me a 2-liter bottle of soda. Oh, that's lovely. And this month, I do want to thank the following people for stopping on by paypal.me/thegaminggang and making not small donations. So the fine folks, Joshua Edwards, Will Burton, Toothless in Poland, Agile Monk, and the Madman. Thank you very much. It is much appreciated. But I appreciate any of you who happen to use those banner ads and or stop by paypal.me/thegaminggang. Thank you kindly. All right. So 245 Trioxin is popping on in, said, not sure I like this remaster trend. Wilmore says there's a toilet stall at their work. Has a gap so wide, the door will open if somebody walks by too quickly. Yeah. There's nothing worse than going someplace and you just have to use a stall. And, maybe there's a few of them and there's one open. And there's the gap, just the locking mechanism just won't catch. You're like, okay, so how am I going to hold this door closed? Cleveland RX says, Jeff, ever since you explained the roll under method to make sense of it for us, I've been completely on board with it. Yeah, because the reality is, yes, with a roll under system, and, others are, roll equal to or less than, every point of your attribute counts, as opposed to just your standard D20 system where it's, okay, well, you get a bonus for a range of attribute numbers. So a lot of times between 9 and 11 or 9 and 12 is 0. So there's no difference whatsoever. It's like, okay. Then if you are running a role-playing game where your action resolution is rolling under your attributes, you're also looking at one of the ways for your player characters to advance. This maybe have experience points. They get to spend points on increasing their attributes. So that becomes a big deal too. Whereas in a lot of D20 games that are just using that modifier for the range, if you've got a 9 and you get 0 and you need to get to a 12 to get a +1, you're really not focused on trying to improve that attribute because it's going to take a whole lot of effort to get there with very little end result, even if you do. So there is that. There is that. Although I have to say, with that Tales of Our Ghosts, it kind of threw me that with the skills, you only get a +1. That's why with the game that we've been putting together live here on the Gaming Gang, a skill would give you advantage, which we've already talked about. Our advantage is different than D&D or many other role-playing game advantages where you roll a second die as far as like if you're rolling a 20-sided die and you got to roll high. Well, you got advantage. You get to roll 2 and you take the best. Now, ours is a little bit different, and a skill would give you advantage, so there would be a bigger swing in your favor if you had that skill. So next time we do another Let's Build a Fantasy Role-Playing Game episode, we'll kind of cover that in a little more detail. Our next topic is going to be gear and treasure and that anyway, so we'll probably have some time to dive on into that. So tonight on our Cthulhuesday, our final Cthulhuesday, because January is coming to an end, we are going to actually talk about some of my tips for Call of Cthulhu Keepers of all experience levels. And we will be getting into that in just a few moments. I did want to mention that I am thinking probably after I come back from Polar Vortex, which I will be attending. If you're in the Chicago area, by all means, it's the 14th, 15th, and 16th of February. I'll be there. Elliot's going to be there. My brother will be hanging out. Come on by. We're going to have some fun. In fact, Elliot and I are only in one event each day, and then the rest of the time we're just going to be hanging out, doing open gaming. We're going to bring a bunch of stuff with us. So if you happen to, stroll past and see us, maybe get in a game. Never know. Anyway, Sean O'Donnell says they did a good job fixing the champion as far as the remaster for Pathfinder. I like the remaster for Pathfinder. There's a good amount of tweaking that was going on. So it's not just, oh, look, we just made you buy a second edition. Now we're going to make you buy this second edition plus. So there is that. 245 Trioxin says they just picked up the No Time to Scream Call of Cthulhu book. Sweet. Very nice. Enjoy. So anyway, I was thinking after I come back from Polar Vortex, I'm going to be streaming live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we'll do Tuesday nights, Thursday nights. And reason is, so for one, I was taking a look at, because, all tax goodies have arrived. So I created more content last year, did way more stuff, and I made 12% less than I did the previous year. It's like, oh, okay. So, that's not how things are supposed to work, right? More content? Yeah. Less payout. Yeah, not good. Not good. So, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not like, oh, this is it. I'm not going to like dangle. Oh, if things don't change, I'm just going to, that'll be all. See ya. No, I'm not going to pull that bullshit on people. I'm not going any place. But as far as the live streams, that could go away. Simply because they're a lot more work. I don't want to say they're a lot more work than what they're worth, because that's certainly not the case. But there isn't a lot of gain with the live streams outside of people hanging out in chat. So that's cool. I appreciate that. I really like the fact that people hang out, and they don't necessarily have to be commenting about what I'm talking about. Sometimes little conversations break out in chat about various different topics and stuff like that. But the live streams and everything, I mean, I enjoy doing them. I have fun. Hopefully, I think it's relatively obvious that I have a good time doing these. But kind of, 245 tracks and says the live streams are 90% of what they watch. Cleveland RX says they're hearing the decline is across the board online for most content creators. I don't know what's going on, but it seems to be hitting everyone. Well, I would think that part of it, I don't know for a fact, but I would think that some of this has to do with YouTube wanting to pay less out in monetization. I mean, that's the reality of it. You've got more and more people who, because if you want, you could pay YouTube to not see any ads. So you think, the content creators are getting much of that money? Of course not. Obviously not. So I think part of it is that. I think part of that is the powers that be are probably looking to focus eyes on other things these days, as opposed to, like tabletop gaming content. I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. But the Madman says, wow, I may have to spend more time with my family. Well, every other Wednesday, the Madman's not here anyway. So it would be like missing out a ton. Like I said, I'm bouncing this around. That it's not for sure yet. Because I don't want to just say, okay, that's it for the live streams. And I mean, I've had people tell me, well, you need to stream more. And it's like, no, I don't. Because when I did 5 shows a week, I got to be honest, I was probably getting fewer views in a week than I do with 3 shows in a week. But I honestly think that we've kind of hit essentially a ceiling. And it seems like that for just about all the videos on the channel, that they all hit a ceiling. And as I mentioned before, it used to be, now granted, okay, so I did my review of the Dungeon Master's Guide, the 2024 edition. And I think I'm at a couple thousand views on that. Give or take, it's probably like 2,200, something like that. And then I did the Worlds and Realms book from 10-Speed Press and Penguin Random House. So it's not even Wizards of the Coast. And that's at, I think, like 1,200 views, something like that. And it used to be that you had Dungeons and Dragons videos would pull in 10, 12,000 on average. Sometimes if I were one of the first creators out the gate with something, which I always tried to do, 25, about 25,000. Because, once again, this is kind of an acquired taste. I do understand that, right? I'm not a 20-something-year-old woman, right? So not like you got a lot of beauty on screen to keep you focused. So Luna's Cave said, no, don't stream more. You're doing a lot already. Burnout is real. Oh, yeah, I know that. You might have hit a plateau. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that's it. Luna's Cave says playthroughs would be cool, but playthroughs would be more work. So, yeah, way more work. So, and as far as if you're talking about like playthroughs, as in like doing a live playthrough of a board game or something like that. Yeah, Melinda's Cave says, yes, way more work. Trust me. I know. The reality is, as far as just like when I do reviews and stuff like that, I've tried to shorten my reviews up by quite a bit, because the reality is the vast majority of people who watch game review videos jump to the end to see what you say, and that's it. So I used to spend a good amount of time with like board games that talking about how do you play, and then moving on to my review. And it's kind of funny, if you aren't certain individuals, then it doesn't, don't bother doing a how to play, because people aren't going to watch. They're going to watch the people who get paid to professionally shoot how to play videos. There you go. 245 Trioxin says a lot of streamers need to rely on Patreon now. I had a Patreon, never really got many people on board. And every time I turned around, Patreon was doing something to make it harder for the content creators and the patrons. So when Patreon, this is a while back, they jacked up their percentage that they kept. And what they did is they actually put that on the patrons. So if somebody was sitting there and supporting your Patreon for, let's say, $1 a month, well, suddenly they were now being charged like $1.20. And there was huge backlash over it. And a lot of people who had Patreons were like, what? And people canceled their support. So it was like, yeah, thanks a lot, assholes. It's like, so you got greedier, and then you decided, hey, we don't want to piss off the people who are on our platform bringing in the money. So we're going to just hand those fees off to the patrons, who then sat there and said, well, screw this. I'm not. So Walunda's Cave says, live interviews with creators, publishers, artists, etc. Interesting to see. Got to realize, though, it doesn't pull in the views. I have interviews on this channel. I share interviews all the time. It's been a little while since I shared one. They don't pull in people. So, I mean, I know Steven over at Roll for Combat, he does his streams. But even if you look at some of his live streams, sometimes, which I kind of stumble across, they'll pop up if I'm on YouTube for something, and it'll show how many people are watching live. And funny enough, a lot of times it's just a bit more than who watched this live a lot. Kind of odd. But yeah, his videos tend to plateau at like 2,000 views on some of them. 245 Trioxin says Steven uses clickbait. Well, yes, he does. I know he does. It's not something I want to dip my toes into. I try to stay away from clickbaity titles. Although every once in a while I'll come up with like a title and put it out there, and then it's like after I look at it for a while, I'm like, That kind of looks like clickbait, but it's really not clickbait because whatever I say I'm going to talk about, I actually talk about. So it's something that I do focus on. Anyway, so I'm just floating these things out here. That's all. The channel's not going anyplace. And strangely enough, it's sort of like, as far as like even the live videos that might pull in, on average, I think we average like 500 views on the live shows. And that's taking into account when, we do some sort of Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons and Dragons related topic. And that pulls in like 12, 1,500 views. So on average, if it's not something like that, we do about 400 views on that. Funny enough, I can do a 10 or 15 minute video where I do a review of something and I get the same number of views and I compare it to the live show, which runs on average hour and a half, maybe a little more than that. And I make about the same monetization wise on YouTube. So it's kind of like, okay, so 10, 15 minutes of video compared to hour and a half of video. And yes, I get it. It's an hour and a half of me babbling on for the most part. It's not like you're like, oh, hey, just like showing off a game or something. But, funny enough, we were doing like live first looks at stuff or live unboxings of stuff. And that didn't bring in the views either. That's why I remember, in fact, I think it was Steven from Roll for Combat who said, hey, you should just do topics instead of like, oh, it's a first look at XYZ book. Because the thing is, if somebody wasn't interested in that book, they didn't show up. And it's kind of funny because there are some folks out there who watch, those who watch after the fact on Memorex. Some of them completely skip the news and they go right to whatever the topic is. And there are about an equal number of people out there who only watch the news. And when I get to the topic, they tune out because it's not something that interests them. So, but yeah, I wouldn't mind doing interviews and stuff like that. What I would probably look to do is say, I think part of the live interview thing that throws people off is if the person who is like part of the interview, if they're not in the chat, it's kind of weird. Like I've been on Steven's show and he's had access to their chat and I hadn't. And people will be like directing comments to me as the guest, and I have no idea. I have no clue whatsoever because Steven will pick things out of chat, like if somebody's got a question or something like that, but not all of it. So it was kind of looks kind of strange. So, but yeah, as far as Patreon, that's why I tell people, and I mention paypal.me/thegaminggang. Because number one, if you go to paypal.me/thegaminggang and you make a $5 donation, then out of that $5, I get about $4.70, 75 cents, something like that. If I had a Patreon, out of that $5, I would probably get about $3.20 thereabouts. I mean, I can't even tell you for sure because it's possible that Patreon charges even more of a percentage now. Just like I always talk about, as much as I appreciate when people utilize the super chat, like Agile Monk will pop in and he'll make a donation through the super chat. YouTube takes half of that. And that's why I tell people, don't do the super chat thing. It's just, why give half of your donation to,
YouTube and Google, essentially, they don't necessarily need it. So that's why when I say, hey, you know what? PayPal.me/the gaming gang is a great way to do it. That's it. Now, I have thought of bouncing around stuff where maybe doing some members only kind of things. And I know there's ways to do that here on YouTube. Once again, YouTube takes half of whatever it is. So there you go. Well, Lotus Cave with a super chat for $1.99. Any car, any color, $99.99. Says, hi, enjoy the dollar cut, YouTube. LemonRx said they heard that super chat feeds the Google algorithm to boost the channel. That is a possibility. That is a reality. But I mean, I should say that may be the reality. But the reality is also, I don't want folks who enjoy the channel to have to sit there and like make super chats that's going to help the algorithm. It's far easier. Like the video, comment on the videos. We usually will have anywhere from, well, depending on the topic, 30 to 50. Sometimes we've had as many as 120 people watching live all at the same time. And then it's, 2 comments on the video. And it's like, oh, okay. Walona's Cave's pointing out, yes, any interaction, even thumbs down, is considered, yeah, it's engagement. It's what YouTube's looking for. So, yes, all this stuff I know. Outside of the super chats boosting the algorithm, once again, it's not something that I know of. It doesn't sound like it would not be true. But once again, I don't want people to have to financially invest for more people to watch this channel, if that makes sense. If you would like to donate to support myself and the gaming gang, that is fantastic. I really do appreciate it. I'm surprised there are a lot of people who are regulars here who never have done that, but it's not something that's required. And I certainly don't feel it should be your responsibility to have to financially goad YouTube into sharing the videos with people. I'll have to look into what I might be able to do as far as doing like a members only kind of thing where you would subscribe by way of paypal.me. Do something along those lines where members have access to videos, 72 hours before other people do, maybe do some stuff specifically for subscribers as far as contests and so forth. So, LimitRx says members only playthrough tutorials. That would be a possibility. But, the realization is that I'm shying away from board games because it's just so damn tough to get the gang together to play to play board games. Everybody's sick. Someone's always sick at Elliot's house. And then if nobody's sick at Elliot's house, then somebody's sick at my brother's house. I've been fine. I had a little sinus thing going, but I'm sure that wasn't contagious or anything like that. And it's like, my God. I mean, we've been trying to get together on a Monday night for a month and a half to 2 months now. And it's like, nope, nothing. So, anyway, Mark Green pops in with a super chat for £5, £5 sterling. Do they still refer to it that way? £5 sterling. So at least we can get you a coffee. Well, thank you very much and welcome aboard. I don't believe I have encountered you in chat before. And if so, I apologize. that I'm not recognizing the name. Anyway, so like I said, I just want to float this stuff out there. We might see the live stream go Tuesday, Thursday. You will still see plenty of videos because I've got plenty of goodies. So if you were following the channel, you saw I shared some videos this weekend. In fact, here's something else I'll mention real quickly before we move on to our brief intermission. I shared my review of the Wandering Tavern, which is very interesting. I really thought it's pretty cool, and it's got a real Studio Ghibli vibe to it. But I mentioned it is overpriced. So Homie and the Dude, who is the publisher of the Wandering Tavern, is lowering the price of the book. I also pointed out, I thought it was really weird. You ordered the hardcover through DriveThruRPG. You can get the hardcover and PDF through DriveThruRPG, but you couldn't get the PDF alone through DriveThruRPG. I was like, that's kind of weird. So it's actually going to be on DriveThruRPG as a separate purchase. You don't have to buy the hardcover just to get it. So I thought that was kind of cool. That they actually paid attention to what I was saying in my critique, which that was really my major critique was this is 204 pages, if I remember right. Let me take a look. 204 pages. And it was, and it had kind of an oddball price too, because this is out of the UK. And if you wanted the hardcover from DriveThruRPG, it was like $60.20. And if you wanted the hardcover with the PDF, it was like $80.40. It was like, what? So they said they're going to lower the price. What it's going to be, I don't know, but it will be a lower price. Yes. So Mark Green says, yeah, they still call it the pound sterling, at least for the time being. Luna's Cave said, that's what I like, honesty, mentioning that it's overpriced. I like that, and I bet you many other people do as well. Well, that's what you get. I think by now, nearly 15 years into doing this, I'm going to tell you what I think. That's it. I mean, I know some folks, they're like, oh, yeah, because I try not to harp too much on price anymore, because then I get the feedback where it's like, well, do you understand how expensive it is to publish stuff? It's like, yeah, I do. I do have a clue. I'm not a publisher, but yeah, I have an idea. But yeah, when I see something where it's like 204 pages, essentially print on demand from DriveThruRPG. I mean, granted, there is a code for you to get some digital content with the hardcover, even though it's not the PDF. It's still $60. I mean, you wouldn't pay that to Paizo Inc. or Wizards of the Coast for 204 pages. It'd probably be like 240, 250. So, Jeff's Mouse Rita review. It's a 10 out of 10, except it's overpriced. So 9 out of 10. So I bought it on Black Friday, 10 out of 10. Yes. My review for the estate for Mouse Rita is coming very shortly. All right. So anyway, just wanted to share some goings on behind the scenes. So tonight I am going to share a series of Call of Cthulhu Keeper tips for our final Cthulhuesday. But first, I think it's time for a brief intermission.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out for a delicious snack in our sparkling refreshment building. Every item a fresh, appetizing taste treat.
Here's the beer with more life. Rainier. Rainier comes by its life naturally. It's naturally brewed, naturally aged. Rainier lets nature take its own sweet time. Make it Rainier for life.
Let's go up to the surface for some Wilkins coffee.
I'll never touch the stuff.
You should. It's a whale of a coffee.
The trucks are rolling, the great big trucks are rolling, and you are the man controlling the big new Johnny Express. Turn right, turn left, and watch her go. Put her in reverse and drive her slow, even hitched up by remote control with a big new Johnny Express.
Yes, get cab and trailer first, then dump truck. It really works. Just watch. Troop carrier. Drive it across a bridge you build. It even fires shells. Then look, in seconds, you make it a tank truck. Change it yourself and fill it from your storage tank. Load cargo with giant crane, moving conveyor, and forklift really works. Tire kit, raise the jack and change the tire. Get cab and trailer, so strong you can even stand on it. Then all these trucks you drive by remote control.
With a big new Johnny Express.
Remember, get Johnny Express by Topper.
I know some of you out there are thinking, wait a second, why is Jeff recycling old intermissions, brief intermissions? Because I can. You know how many brief intermissions I've done? I have a few hundred of these things. It's like, should I just reuse one that I haven't? Yeah, I used once. It's like, yeah, I think I'm going to do that. Madman says, I love these brief intermissions. The old commercials take me back, makes them feel young for a couple of minutes. A lot of times I will share commercials of stuff that I wasn't around for. And I'm sure the Madman wasn't either, because we're right in the same ballpark as far as age. But some of it is kind of interesting to see just the like the old, like late 1950s, early 1960s commercials, and how just, strange they look to us today. Just like if we shared commercials like now gone, if we went into a time machine, right? We showed them to people from like the 50s and 60s, they'd sit there and half of them probably wonder, what the hell are you advertising? What is this? What's it for? What do you mean it's got all these side effects? Death? So restless leg syndrome. You take this, you could die? I don't know. I think I'll stick with the restless leg. Something else I should mention, if you tuned in a little bit late, audio probably sounds a little bit different to you tonight. Hopefully, thumbs up on that. I tried to make some changes just to kind of give the audio a little more oomph, because it was sounding kind of flat, and my voice isn't real flat. So, don't know. We'll find out. So if the audio sounds okay, let me know in chat. All right. So as I pointed out earlier, you know what? Let me grab a quick sip here. Let me wet the old whistle. Bandman says personally they think it sounds a little better. Cool. That's what I was aiming for. I give it a little, like I said, a little more oomph, a little brightness is what the term is. Anyway, so as I mentioned, tonight's topic for our final Cthulhuesday is actually some keeper tips. So rather than taking a look at a Call of Cthulhu adventure like we've done throughout the month, I thought, let's talk about stuff that'll help anybody, right? It doesn't just apply to a particular adventure or particular campaign. So as someone who has been running Call of Cthulhu since it came out, yes, I had that 1-inch box. Yes, I still remember where I bought it, the circumstances of buying it, who I ran my first adventure for, which was my brother, actually, who really didn't play role-playing games. And I shouldn't say really didn't. He didn't, outside of when he was in 8th grade and his friends introduced him to Dungeons and Dragons, which was this new thing that nobody had heard of. But I remember I ran the Haunting. If I remember correctly, that is what it was called. Now I think they call it the Haunted House, or vice versa. And then my brother didn't play role-playing games for decades, and now he plays with the gang. So anyway, so I've got a lot of years under my belt as a Call of Cthulhu keeper, and a few things that I think are very important if you are going to be a successful keeper. Now, these are just a few, right? I mean, I could probably give you 100 if I really thought about it. But these apply to keepers of all experience levels. So even if you're brand new to Call of Cthulhu, or if you've been around for a long time, like I am, Mark points out, Ghost Bed for the win. Yes, anyone who's ever played that introductory adventure for Call of Cthulhu remembers that damn bed. Yep, I've unleashed it on plenty of unsuspecting players. Okay, so one of the first things I would recommend, and this might sound kind of weird, and I'll explain why. And this goes especially for Call of Cthulhu, but this can apply to other role-playing games as well. Do not allow people who are not playing the game to sit at your table. Somebody says, hey, I'm kind of curious about this game, or maybe someone who's already in your group is like, hey, I've got a friend of mine. They're kind of curious about this. They would maybe like to play, but they want to sit in before they decide. The answer should be no. And the reason behind that is people who are sitting at your table who are not playing in the adventure are not only a major distraction, but they can never help themselves from chiming in on what's going on in the adventure and throwing in their 2 cents. Maybe there's somebody out there who can sit at the game table and keep their lip zipped, but I've never encountered that. And I have made the mistake of allowing people who might be interested in playing Call of Cthulhu to sit in on an adventure, or a session, I should say, and it never works out. It never works out. And the reality, too, is I've never seen somebody ever show up on time. So they normally end up coming over. You've been playing for a while, and then they have no point of reference to what's going on. And then they're about to, sit there and say, oh, well, it's obviously, hey, you're not playing. Oh, if I were you guys, I would. like, zip it, zip. And then I remember my nephew Cameron had one of his friends sit in, and it was the same kind of thing. It was he got there after we'd been playing for about a couple of hours, and he was basically, I don't want to say confused by what was going on, but just couldn't seem to wrap their head around a tabletop role-playing game, which tomorrow night is going to be our topic of discussion. We are going to talk about running tabletop role-playing games for video gamers, because there are certain things that you really, really need to get a handle on if you want to be successful introducing video gamers to tabletop role-playing games. So we will discuss tomorrow. But anyway, so he was sitting there, and then when we wrapped up the adventure, because it was actually the introduction adventure in the new edition of Massive Nyarlathotep. The adventure that now takes place prior to Massive Nyarlathotep to introduce Jackson Elias as a character, as a meaningful character, so that when Massive Nyarlathotep starts, what happens has more impact with your players than if it's just, oh, well, here we go. Mark Green says, Call of Cthulhu really does rely on building atmosphere and making the decision to investigate a natural one. We're actually going to get into atmosphere in just a minute. But like I said, to sum up, so anyway, okay, so we finished up. The players were very satisfied with the finale of the adventure. They had a really good time. And then my nephew's friend was sitting there, and he's like, well, I don't understand. That didn't make sense. That didn't make any sense where this was going on and blah, 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 that was going on. And I was like, okay, so just so you know, you showed up halfway through the adventure, and you've never played this before, and you already were having a hard time kind of understanding how this all comes about. So I'm like, so it made sense to these guys, because I even asked, I said, did it make sense to you guys? They're like, yeah, sure, of course it did. I said, so that's who it's important to have like an understanding with, and that they're satisfied with, oh yeah, okay, that all made sense. So Melwinius says they haven't played many Call of Cthulhu games, but remember the Game Master taking their sheets as they were mentally done. I don't know if Melwinius is talking about because their characters were temporarily insane, or because they as players were mentally done. It was like, no more soup for you. No more Call of Cthulhu for you. Bart says the introduction adventure seems to be a good idea, but it fails as Jackson becomes a MacGuffin. Well, it depends on how you're going to present him. I mean, I just presented Jackson Elias as just another guy who's part of this expedition. And then I will say that I did kind of push further back the reveal that he's not who he says he is in the beginning. So Melwinia says, yep, they were mentally insane. So in a situation like that, I wouldn't take somebody's character sheet away. Oh, unless you were all like, that was it. I mean, you all went crazy and that was the end of the game. Well, I guess I would see that. So my next tip is don't baby your players. Be fair. Don't be obtuse. Mean what you say what you mean. never mislead your players at the game table. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have NPCs lie through their teeth to your player characters. Yeah, I mean, that's expected. That is certainly expected. But this is Call of Cthulhu we're talking about. And yes, it's got that, in my opinion, unfair reputation of being the role-playing game that's, always total party kills and things like that. I will guarantee you there have been more games per player count where there have been total party kills in Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder over the years. Maybe not more recently than in Call of Cthulhu. So gotta keep that in mind. It is Call of Cthulhu. Your adventures should be lethal. Yes, I know you've got Pulp Cthulhu, which is going to boost the survivability of the player characters. I tend to run some pulpy action in my Call of Cthulhu adventures, but I don't use the Pulp Cthulhu options as far as, giving them more hit points and things like that. But the thing is, if you baby your players, then they are always going to lean on the keeper to keep the action moving and to help solve their questions and solve their mysteries as opposed to figuring them out themselves. I think one of the problems that you see most new keepers with Call of Cthulhu, a trap that they fall into, is they want to make sure that, everybody has a good time and, we get through the story in a certain amount of play time and that we come to a successful conclusion in a set number of sessions or in this, particular session, right? And to do that, sometimes they have to, explain things or over-explain things or just give up the ghost to their player characters to help move things along. Now, I'm not saying that you should allow your game to come to a screeching halt because your players can't decipher a clue, or maybe they've rolled bad dice and they didn't get the clue. That's going to be another tip in just a few moments. So I'm not saying let the game bog down, but don't jump in every time your players hit a stumbling block that they're trying to figure something out, because then you will never have a group of players who really depends upon themselves to figure things out. They'll always first challenge for stumbling block they hit. They'll all be like, oh, I don't know. Oh, come on, man. Oh, so what's really going on? Give us the clue or whatever. Nope. Don't do it unless, like I said, the game is coming to a complete halt. There's a difference between a game coming to a complete screeching halt and one in which the players are trying to figure things out. That they're, discussing amongst themselves. They got different ideas to do stuff. Almost never in any role-playing game are you ever going to be sitting there running a game as a game master and your players all look at you blankly and say, we have no idea. We have no clue what to do next. Almost never will see that. I have never personally seen that with players at my game table. Now, if they sat there and said, man, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Of course. So, Agile Monk is with us. Just toss out a $20 super chat. Remember we were talking about these super chats earlier, and I did mention Agile Monk. So they want and need to give a shout out to the folks at Troll Lord Games. Castles and Crusades Reforged turned out fantastic. It's really the best ever of the game, just as I know Gary and Jim Ward would have wanted it. Yes. Agile Monk says, this is funds for you to the YouTube gremlins, so they'll like you. See, someone else who's into this. Oh, well, yeah. The super chats mean something to the algorithm. Like I said, I don't know. So yes, thank you very much, Agile Monk. Much appreciated. So anyways, so like I said, don't baby your players. You don't, like I said, don't be a blank wall for them. But the first hint of maybe, I don't want to say confusion because it's not confusion. Maybe the first hint of, say, I don't want to say disappointment either. Apprehension, maybe? Where you might have your players sitting around the table thinking, no, I don't know if I'm smart enough for this. It happens. It happens. In all role-playing games, your players, they'll hit a point where they're like, I don't know, man. I'm coming up with a blank. Let them try to work through it. If it does bring the game to a screeching halt, then yes, step in and try to get things back on track by revealing the least amount that you have to. So next up, my next tip is game plan. Prep, and get ready to throw it all out if you need to. Call of Cthulhu is not a role-playing game, in my opinion, that does well, seat of the pants, just let's make this story up on the fly. Will people have a good time doing something like that where it's all, we're all creating together and everybody's throwing in things left and right? Yeah, you might have a good time. Is it something that people are going to remember? No, they will not. What players remember are expertly run Call of Cthulhu adventures by their keeper. Now, having said, make sure that you game plan and then get ready to throw that plan out. Is what I mean is if you've written an adventure or you're using a published adventure, know it, not necessarily inside and out. At least know the portion that you believe you're going to get done in your game session, that time out, plus a little bit more. And I'm one who always recommends with a Call of Cthulhu adventure or campaign that you do your best to try to end every game session on a cliffhanger. Because if you end it on a cliffhanger, then your players are already chomping at the bit to get back to the table to find out what happens next. Oh, does Commander Cody live? Does he get killed by those moon people? I got to come back next week and find out. That's what you want. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that, every time you play Call of Cthulhu, you have to sit there and be like, okay, well, we wrapped up this adventure, but now I got to come up with a cliffhanger. No, of course not. But if you are going to be running an adventure that is going to be multiple parts, multiple sessions, always look to try to plug in a cliffhanger. But as far as the game plan goes, what I always recommend is think to yourself as a keeper, 3 possible outcomes of important points of that adventure or that campaign session. And if you've run Call of Cthulhu for a certain group of people for a certain amount of time, you already have a fairly good idea of what avenue they may pursue, what direction they might go in. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will. And to be a successful keeper, you also don't want your players to feel like they're being railroaded. Now, because it is Call of Cthulhu, it is a horror role-playing game, you are looking at, sorry to say, railroading your players to a certain extent, because Call of Cthulhu is not a sandbox role-playing game. The horror genre in role-playing games is not sandboxy, right? Because you have to have kind of an introduction, a middle, an end. You have to have a plot. Now, does that mean you have to stick to that plot? No, but you have to have kind of an idea of what's going on with this storyline and have a clue of what avenues your players may pursue. And that way, when they decide to go down that avenue, you're prepared. Now, if they suddenly decide they're going to go off on some tangent that you didn't see coming a mile away, a lot of times you can kind of roll with the punches with that, just fly by the seat of your pants, and then kind of steer them back towards one of those avenues that you've kind of given thought to. Doesn't mean you always have to do that, but you always want to at least try to bring them back around to where the adventure was heading in the first place. Because, like I said, this is not a sandbox game. And if you approach it as a sandbox game, your players aren't going to find it very scary. I'll tell you that much. But yes, prep, game plan, have an idea, know your adventure, at least for the portion that you're going to be running, know that inside out. Know the entire adventure. You got to know how an adventure ends before you can run it. You can't just, not with Call of Cthulhu, you can't just crack open an adventure and just start running it as you read, unless it's a solitary adventure that's published by Chaosium Inc. Agile Monk says it's a bit more subtle, but can help. Lead the witness. Yes. Exactly. Ask them questions that the answers will lead them in a particular direction. But you ask them the question as if because what you're doing is you're actually asking the question, but you're planting the seed in their mind for the answer that they will come up with themselves. So, right? So you're asking them the question. They'll think, oh, yeah, you know what? I just came up with that. We're doing this. And here, they wouldn't have thought of that unless you led them with that question. So, yeah, I definitely believe so. So Kevin King says they were in a Castles and Crusades stream briefly today. We'll talk about Castles and Crusades after I wrap this up. Agile Monk says they used to play Daredevils by FGU way back in the days. They were good in teaching these concepts to the game masters in their adventures. FGU is not remembered all that fondly by some people, but I thought they were a pretty good role-playing game company. They didn't have the stellar budget that the Wizards of the Coast, well, I shouldn't say Wizards of the Coast, TSRs, the Chaosiums, the Mayfair games had back in the day, but they had some pretty good stuff. Next tip. If a clue is important, don't hide it behind dice rolls. That is one of the biggest issues that people have had with Call of Cthulhu since the beginning of the role-playing game, is that as keepers, and it wasn't necessarily clear in the early days, because it was kind of presented like, oh, the dice are the final arbiters of everything. But you would have adventures where it's like, okay, so there were 3 or 4 important clues. One of them is super important. Player characters didn't find that clue. They rolled bad dice rolls, so they didn't get that clue. They had the 3 other clues, which gave them enough information for them to jump to a conclusion, which then leads to like a total party kill, because the clue they missed was like the important clue of how do you defeat this thing? Or maybe we shouldn't try to defeat this thing because it'll just turn us into like just greasy spots on the floor, right? So if a clue is important to the adventure, to your players piecing together the mystery, coming up with a conclusion, don't put it behind a dice roll. Provide that clue. Sometimes who you provide that clue to can be pretty entertaining and will make logical sense to the group. And this is one of the things that Trail of Cthulhu gets right, is whatever clues there are that the player characters have the appropriate skill, they will get. Now, they might be able to spend points out of their pool to get more information about that clue, expand on that clue. But the clue itself gets provided. And I'm really curious how the second edition of Trail of Cthulhu is. Supposedly, we'll get a chance to look at that. I don't know. But Pelgrane Press had said previously they wanted me to review it, so we'll find out. Something else as far as your clues and your threads as far as mysteries go, make them sensible, make them logical. If you're running an adventure that is published and something just seems to take a huge jump in logic, try to bring it back around to making more sense. So Agile Monk is sharing my bio from the website. Yeah, I should update that at some point. That's like years old. Anyway, so yes, try to make things make sense, because if they don't, your players are going to poke holes in the proceedings, and then once they start poking holes in that, then their satisfaction level with the adventure starts to dip. So yes, so make your clues and your mystery threads make sense. Something else I like to do is I like to vary the pace. I might vary how I speak at the game table. What I tend to do is if the action heats up, I might talk a little faster, or I might pause for effect, but I try to kind of vary things as far as just vocal presentation at the game table. And I like to keep my players a little off guard, kind of a little flat-footed, I guess maybe I would say is probably one way I like to go about doing it. Like, I'm famous for if there's like suddenly a loud noise or, a gunshot or something like that, I'll usually wait until someone's just finishing up saying something, and then it's like, boom. So you get a little bit of a jump around the table. Yeah, that's just how I do it. But I do find that tends to keep your players more on their toes, kind of, I don't want to say edge of their seats, but they're usually like kind of more involved when you kind of vary the pace of the proceedings, as opposed to, okay, all right, okay, yes, this, yeah, okay, all right, this, okay, all right, this. It's like something else I also recommend, huge tip, and this is for keepers, this is for game masters, this is whatever role-playing game is your current game of choice. Read. And I don't necessarily mean just read game content. I'm talking about read fiction, history, what have you. So Call of Cthulhu is a horror role-playing game. It steers towards cosmic horror. Does that mean it has to be cosmic horror? No, of course not. It can easily veer into gothic horror. It can steer into urban fantasy and horror. You could do splatterpunk with it if you want. You have a lot of different variations of the horror genre that you can dive into for Call of Cthulhu. So every adventure doesn't necessarily have to involve the mythos. You can have other horror tropes that you want to introduce in a short adventure or maybe even a campaign if you want, and you can easily run that with Call of Cthulhu. But I always recommend not only reading horror fiction, but also mystery fiction. Because especially if you're going to be writing your own adventures, it's a good idea to understand the major beats to a mystery and the major beats to a mystery investigation. Because at its heart, Call of Cthulhu, while being a horror role-playing game, is a game of investigation, of uncovering clues, piecing those clues together, leading from one point to the next, to the next, to the next. So if you don't read, I think your work is cut out for you. And part of that also is that if you don't read fiction or history, something else that's important too, which is kind of a separate tip, but I'll include it here, is do a little research on the time period that you're running an adventure in. Don't just use what's in the adventure. Once again, we're talking about a published work, but even if you're creating your own adventure, if you're setting it during the 1920s in Warsaw, do a little research about 1920s Warsaw. If it's 1935 Hollywood, California, have an idea what was going on in Hollywood in 1935. It's not difficult to find. I mean, you can pull up calendars, which will show you the exact dates. So you can have, there was a Friday the 13th in March. Okay. So March 1935, Hollywood, California, Friday the 13th, which means Saturday's the 14th and Sunday. And so you add more realism, I suppose, but it also provides you with allowing your players to feel like they're really involved in the adventure. Where, because I was someone who, during my Massonay or Lothotep campaign I ran when it came out, I would actually utilize historical things that happened in like newspaper articles, because the player characters, I should say, are always reading newspapers. So I would always toss in various different historical things going on. Now, one aspect of Horror on the Orient Express is the newspaper articles that are included and all the information about the various different things going on in the world really is a big selling point to that campaign. That's one of the things I like most about Horror on the Orient Express. As far as the adventure itself, it's just kind of a bunch of fetch quests. You're going and finding the pieces. But I really do like the fact that the players stay like in step with the news of the day. So that's one of the things as far as doing research, I think is important. Plus, if you're running a game that's set in a certain place, a certain time period, and you're way off, and you have players at your table who know that, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose those players. So like if you were sitting there and you're running a game that's supposed to be set in 1941 Detroit, and you have people using fax machines, people around your table will be like, fax machines? And then they're going to argue with you that fax machines didn't exist at that point in time. So yes, don't be doing that. Do a little bit of research. Get into some research. Something else, I've got 2 hints or tips left. One is make sure if you're running mythos adventures that the mythos is weird and unearthly. Your great old ones, your monsters, your weird alien beings are not just bags of stats and hit points. They should be weird and bizarre. That is the point of cosmic horror. And that's one of the reasons why the concept of sanity is part of the game. It's not because, oh my gosh, I've seen something that's just terrible. That's part of it. Part of it is also that our human minds cannot comprehend the motives of these beings, and the way they go about doing things is just so insanely out there that our minds just can't handle it, and they break down. So as far as like monsters and creatures and things like that, always describe them. Let your players come up with names for them. So if you have an adventure where there's deep ones and your players all know what deep ones are, I don't care. You are not going to refer to those creatures as deep ones. You are going to describe them. Your players can all sit around the table and be like, oh yeah, we're dealing with deep ones. Oh, I bet you we're going to run across people who have that Innsmouth taint. Better keep an eye out for that. Let them come to that conclusion. Do not provide that conclusion. Describe the creatures, describe their actions. Do not say, oh, well, you know, the Shoggoth comes bursting. No. Nope. No. Last item as far as a tip. And once again, this can go for any role-playing game. As a keeper, root for your players. Role-playing games, and especially Call of Cthulhu, and I know there are some keepers out there who would completely disagree with me on this, but thankfully they are few and far between. It is not a competition between the players and the game master. It is not, oh, how many player characters can the keeper kill in this session? It is not that. Root for your players. Push them to be successful. Push them to come to the conclusion of the adventure. Now, if they decide the best plan of action to defeat this horrific creature from beyond the stars is to kill it and themselves alongside it, because that's the only way it's going to happen, well, then that's the way it's going to be. And I'm going to tell you right now, your players will walk away from that table like, yeah, we all got killed, but we stopped that motherfucking thing. So as opposed to having to be the obstacle that your players have to, overcome constantly outside of what's going on in the adventure, be on their side, but also be fair. So you can root for your players. You can be a fan of your players. Then you can also be fair to your NPCs and your monsters too. Like I started off these tips, I said, don't baby your players. Don't. Be fair, be consistent, and make sure that your players are having a good time at your game table. And part of that is rooting for their success, not their failure. Because even if your players are having a good time and things are moving along really well, and then suddenly the bottom falls out and the adventure is a complete failure, they're going to remember the failure aspect of it, not all the fun they had in that adventure up to that point. Simeon's with us in chat. I'm sure we've got a few folks who popped in that I've missed while I've been talking. Do I roll in the open? Call of Cthulhu is not really a role-playing game that's conducive to sharing all of your roles in front of the group. In fact, there are some player roles that have to be done by the keeper in secrecy too. So lots like listen, spot hidden items. Sometimes I try to make sure I have my players roll as often as they possibly can for their own characters. But like as an example, somebody goes to use their listen skill at a door and they roll their dice and they fail. Well, they already know there could be something behind that door and they failed. So the answer is no, you don't really hear anything out of the ordinary. Whereas if the keeper is rolling the dice for that roll, then when they say, well, there isn't anything that you hear that's out of the ordinary, the player's like, well, is there or isn't there? But they don't know if they succeeded and there's nothing to hear, or if they failed and there was something, they just didn't hear it. So, yeah, as far as rolling in front of the players, other games, I don't mind. I don't mind whatsoever tossing dice. In fact, the reality is I don't really use a game master screen. In fact, I started to use one a little bit, but normally what I do is I have a chair next to me where I would keep stuff, and I would have like a box top or, of course, now dice tray to roll my dice in. So I don't tend to have anything separating me from the other players. Now I do. Now I tend to use a short landscape game master screen because I'll use a tablet and I might have a book. But yeah, I still try to do my like spare chair next to me. So, all right. So there you have it. That was my last tip for keepers out there. Root for your players. Be a fan of the player characters. Do not stand in their way. But also, once again, don't just hand over everything to them so that the game doesn't have any sort of challenge. All righty then. So tomorrow night, we're going to talk about running tabletop role-playing games for video gamers, because there are certain things that you really need to do to introduce the hobby to them and to keep them involved so that they decide, hey, you know what? This is a cool hobby. I want to be part of this, as opposed to, no, this is too different than what I'm used to playing on my computer or on my Xbox, PlayStation, what have you. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. All righty. If you're watching live, thank you very much. If you watched live and took part in chat, a bigger thank you, because not only do you keep me company, you're also keeping each other company as I babble on and on and on. Relighter Gamer was with us. Thank you very much. Like I said, I'm sure I missed some folks who popped into chat while I was babbling on. But of course, I also know a lot of folks out there, you don't have an opportunity to watch live. Doesn't matter if you're watching live or on Memorex. I really do appreciate you taking time out to watch any of the videos here on the channel. In fact, there's over 2,100 of them at this point. So, of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Appease the YouTube algorithm gods by leaving a comment if you have an opportunity to. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when the Dispatch streams live, it'll also inform you when I share other videos, such as my recent review of The Magical Land of Yeld, 2nd edition from Atarashi Games. Yes. Very nice. Very nice. I liked it a lot. So definitely check out that review. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. I will be back tomorrow. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about role-playing games and running tabletop role-playing games for video gamers. So I hope you join me for that. And thank you very kindly once again, as I said, for watching. Until I see you next time, hopefully it's tomorrow, I hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.